Universities are obsessed with saving space. Dorms are designed to fit as many students as possible into as little room as possible without violating the fire code. The absolute worst byproduct of this philosophy is the Jack and Jill bathroom layout. I was a sophomore at a mid-sized state college. I lived in West Hall, a towering brick monolith built in the 1970s. Instead of communal showers down the hall, every pair of dorm rooms shared a small, windowless bathroom between them. I didn't have a roommate. 2 girls lived in the room next to mine. The setup was awful. If you entered from your side, you had to lock the other door so nobody walked in on you. When you left, you had to remember to unlock it again. If you forgot, the other room got locked out of the bathroom completely. I hated those girls. They left clumps of hair in the drain. They stole my expensive face wash. They constantly forgot to unlock my door. In late December, the campus cleared out for the winter holiday. The university allows international students and kids taking accelerated winter courses to remain in the dorms. I was stuck taking a brutal macroeconomics class to fix my GPA. By Friday afternoon, the building was a ghost town. The girls in the room next door packed their suitcases, slammed their door, and caught a ride to the airport. I was completely alone on the 4th floor. The silence exposes the mechanical flaws of the structure. You hear the water pipes groaning inside the walls. You hear the wind rattling the cheap aluminum window frames. It was Tuesday night. The weather outside was punishing. A massive lake-effect snowstorm burying the campus under 2 feet of powder. I was sitting cross-legged on my cheap twin mattress, surrounded by economics textbooks. The radiator beneath my window hissed, pushing dry, scorching heat into the small room. Around 11 o'clock, the plumbing in the wall violently shuddered. The shower turned on in the shared bathroom. I looked up from my textbook, startled by the sudden sound. I stared at the thin wooden door connecting my room to the bathroom. The girls in the other side were in California. I watched them leave. They took all their luggage. I assumed the university maintenance staff was doing winter pipe flushes. Or maybe the housing director assigned a stranded international student to the empty room next door without notifying me. I grumbled, rubbed my dry eyes, and put my headphones in. I figured whoever was in there would finish up in 10 minutes. 45 minutes passed. The water was still running, a constant hiss of water hammering against the plastic tub. My irritation finally boiled over. The hot water tanks in West Hall are notoriously small. Whoever was taking an hour-long shower was draining the entire supply for the floor. I threw my blanket off, walked over to the connecting door, and knocked sharply on the wood. "Hayes," I called out, "can you wrap it up? You're burning all the hot water." No response, just the relentless roar of the shower head. I grabbed the brass door handle and twisted. It didn't budge. The thumb-turn lock was engaged from the inside. "Hello," I yelled, pounding the side of my fist against the doorframe. Nothing. My annoyance started turning into concern. Dorm showers are slippery. Students pass out from heat exhaustion or slip and hit their heads on the bathroom fittings all the time. If someone was unconscious in there, they were going to drown in a clogged tub. I didn't wait. I grabbed my room key, stepped out into the desolate main hallway, and walked down the awful patterned hallway carpet to the room next to mine. I raised my knuckles to knock on their main door. I didn't have to. The heavy, fire-rated door wasn't latched. It was resting about an inch ajar, casting a thin sliver of darkness out into the fluorescent glow of the hallway. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was stripped bare. Both mattresses had been flipped upside down on the metal frames for winter break. The desks were cleared. The closets were standing wide open and empty. I crossed their dark room, stepping carefully over the bare tile, and approached their side of the shared bathroom door. I grabbed the brass handle and tried to turn it, but it was locked from the inside. I took a slow step backward. The air in my lungs turned stale and cold. A Jack and Jill bathroom is a sealed concrete box. There are no exterior windows. There are exactly 2 doors. My door was locked from the inside. The door on the other side was also locked from the inside. Someone had to be in there. The shower continued to blast against the plastic tub. Steam curled out around the frame, dampening the paint. I looked down. A dark pool of water was seeping out from the gap beneath the door, soaking slowly into the cheap carpet of the dorm room. The drain was either clogged or intentionally blocked. "Campus security," I shouted at the wood. "I'm calling the police. Open the door." The water kept running. A terrifying, irrational thought invaded my brain. What if it was just a plumbing malfunction? What if a pipe burst, the pressure shifted the doors, and the lock simply jammed? I didn't want to dial emergency services and face a massive fine for an engineering glitch. The gap between the bottom of the bathroom door and the floor tile was unusually wide, almost 2 inches of clearance to account for the door sweep. I reached into my sweatpants pocket. I pulled out my cell phone. I opened the camera and turned the flash on. I knelt down on the damp carpet. My hands felt stiff and numb. I pressed the phone against the floor and slid the camera under the gap, aiming it directly into the dark bathroom. I tapped the screen. A blinding burst of LED white light flashed under the gap. I quickly pulled the device back. I stood up, wiping the dirty water off the screen with my thumb, and opened the photo gallery. The image loaded. The flash had lit the small, enclosed washroom perfectly. The shower curtain was pulled all the way back. The bathtub was entirely empty. The water was simply cascading directly out of the fixture, slamming into the plastic pan and flooding over the edge. Nobody was standing in the shower. I dragged my thumb across the screen, zooming in on the bottom half of the photo. Lying perfectly flat on the soaking wet ceramic tiles, positioned directly against the inside of the door, was a man. He was wearing a filthy, saturated winter coat. He wasn't moving. He wasn't hiding. His face was pushed sideways against the wet grout. The camera flash caught his features perfectly. His eyes were wide open, staring directly into the camera, and he was smiling. He was smiling so wide I could see every tooth. He had entered the empty dorm room, locked himself inside the shared bathroom, turned the shower on full blast to mask the sound of his movements, and laid down on the floor, waiting for me to unlock my side of the door to investigate the noise. The phone slipped out of my hand, hitting the carpet with a dull thud. I didn't pick it up. I didn't think, I just ran. I scrambled backward, tripped over the metal frame of the flipped mattress, caught my balance, and bolted out into the main hallway. I sprinted for the stairwell. I didn't stop running until I hit the ground floor. I hit the emergency push bar at the ground level and exploded out into the raging blizzard in just my socks and a t-shirt. I ran through the deep snow until I reached the glass lobby of the campus library. I threw myself over the circulation desk, screaming at the night librarian to call the police. Campus security and city police forced their way into the dorm within 15 minutes. They shattered the bathroom doors. The washroom was empty. The officers found the suspended ceiling tiles directly above the shower stall pushed aside. A dark, hollow utility shaft ran vertically through the core of the building, carrying the main plumbing lines to the roof. He got into the building without using a single door. I refused to go back to that building again. They reassigned me to another dorm with a roommate, but I don't think it made anything better. I still find myself watching the space under doors, waiting for the light under the door to disappear. I just want to finish college and leave. I was a sophomore living in a ground floor suite on the absolute edge of the campus map. The location was terrible. The dorm was pushed right up against a patch of dense, ugly woods and a massive commuter parking lot that rarely had any working street lamps. The worst part was our door. We didn't have a secure interior hallway that required a keycard swipe. Our suite door opened straight out onto a tiny concrete patio, completely exposed to the outside. It was mid-November, freezing cold, pouring rain. My 3 suite mates went to an off-campus party around 8. I had a brutal migraine, so I stayed behind. I locked the door, pulled the privacy blinds shut, took a couple of painkillers, and passed out in my bed. The medicine knocked me out hard. I woke up to sharp knocking on the patio door, steady and insistent. I checked my phone screen. It was 3:42 a.m. The knocking didn't stop. It wasn't the sloppy, uncoordinated banging of a drunk student trying to find the right room. It was sharp, authoritative. I hauled myself out of bed, shivering in my pajamas, and shuffled through the dark living room toward the entryway. I didn't unlock it right away. I pressed my eye against the little glass peephole in the door. The motion sensor light on the patio was on. The glare was blinding in the rain. A guy was standing right on the welcome mat. He was wearing a dark blue weatherproof jacket with thick silver reflective strips across the chest. He had a dark baseball cap pulled low over his face, hiding his eyes from the freezing rain, and he was holding a massive, black tactical flashlight. He looked exactly like a campus security guard. He leaned close to the peephole, tapping on the frame again. He held up a white, rectangular piece of plastic dangling from a black lanyard, flashing it at the door. I threw the deadbolt and cracked the door open a couple of inches, leaving the security chain attached. The freezing wind whipped right through the gap. The guy didn't back up. He stood totally still in the downpour. In a flat, incredibly calm voice, he told me that a severe gas leak had been detected in the boiler room directly under our suite. He said the entire ground floor was under a mandatory, immediate evacuation. He ordered me to grab a coat, step outside, and follow him across the commuter lot to the overflow gym. The adrenaline completely burned away my migraine. It sounded totally real. Our building was ancient, the pipes groaned all winter. A gas leak made total sense. The uniform, the keycard, the firm instructions, everything checked out. My hand actually moved to unhook the chain lock. I was fully prepared to grab my winter coat and walk out into the storm. Then my brain finally processed a glaring problem. He said the entire ground floor was being evacuated. I looked past his shoulder into the courtyard, expecting to see some sign of urgency, lights, movement, anything, but there was nothing at all. No flashing strobes, no patrol cars, no other guards moving between the buildings. The entire dorm complex looked completely normal, completely still. That's when it stopped making sense. He had said the entire ground floor was being evacuated. I looked back at the guy. I stared hard at the white plastic rectangle dangling from his lanyard. It didn't have a picture on it. It didn't have a magnetic strip or a barcode. It was literally just a blank piece of thick white plastic, cut out to look like an ID badge in the dark. I looked at the reflective jacket. It didn't have the embroidered university logo on the shoulder. He wasn't a campus guard. He was a predator relying completely on a cheap reflective jacket and a flashlight to force me to obey him. He needed me to unhook that chain, step out of a locked, brightly lit room, and walk with him into an unlit parking lot right next to a patch of dark woods. He made up an emergency that required me to leave safety and isolate myself with him in the dark. I didn't try to call him out. I didn't ask for a badge number or tell him I knew he was faking it. If you challenge a guy like that, they usually just escalate to kicking the door in. I slammed the door shut and locked it. Immediately, something hit the outside of the door so hard the frame shook. The calm voice was gone. Whatever he had been pretending to be, it dropped immediately. I didn't stick around the entryway. I sprinted into the bathroom, locked myself in, and called 911. The actual campus police and 2 city squad cars swarmed the courtyard about 8 minutes later. The flashing strobes lit up my entire room through the blinds. The guy was completely gone. He left muddy boot prints on the concrete patio heading straight for the tree line. The cops checked the boiler room. No gas leak. Dispatch hadn't received a single call about the building. The university sent out an emergency text alert the next morning about an impersonator, but the description of a guy in a rain jacket and a hat was completely useless. I broke my housing contract that weekend and moved into a high-rise dorm in the center of campus on the 6th floor, where every door opened into a hallway and nothing led directly outside. Because I realized something I hadn't really thought about before. You don't need to break into a place if you can convince someone to open it for you, and most people are already trained to do exactly that. Living in a college dorm doesn't teach you independence. It teaches you how much you actually hate other people. I'm a junior. I was supposed to have a single room this year, but the housing department overbooked the incoming freshman class, so they shoved me into an overflow double in a building that doesn't even have air conditioning. Our dorm room was a standard, miserable cinderblock box. 2 beds, 2 desks, 1 narrow window looking out over the student parking lot. My roommate's name was Tyler. He was the kind of guy who thought being annoying was a personality. He played acoustic guitar at night, never washed his dishes, and treated sleep like it was optional. I'm an accounting major. I like quiet, I like structure. Tyler was neither. The worst part wasn't even his habits, it was his schedule, or lack of one. He'd leave at night and come back hours later, always loud, always careless, always waking me up. I confronted him about it. I told him if he was going to come in at dawn, he needed to be quiet. I asked him to be quieter when he came back late. He just laughed and said I should stop resisting the energy of the room. I wanted to hit him with my textbook. It was mid-October, a Tuesday night. Tyler told me he was going to a friend's apartment off campus to work on a midterm project. He left around 9. I had a very important financial accounting exam the next morning. I stayed up until 1 a.m. cramming formulas into my brain. I was exhausted. I put my earplugs in, turned off the desk lamp, and crashed face down on my mattress. Around 4 a.m., the heavy wooden door to our dorm clicked open. I felt the draft of cold air from the hallway hit my neck. My eyes peeled open. I was facing the cinderblock wall, my back to the center of the room. I let out an irritated sigh. "Tyler," I groaned, my voice muffled by my pillow. "Shut the door quietly, please." I didn't hear him reply. I just heard the heavy click of the metal latch engaging as the door closed. Then came the shuffling. Usually, Tyler dumped his keys on his desk and collapsed onto his bed on the opposite side of the room. This time, the shuffling didn't stop near his desk. The soft scrape of rubber soles moved slowly across the tile, walking right past his side of the room, coming directly toward my bed. My irritation spiked. I assumed he wanted to borrow my phone charger or ask a stupid question. The shuffling stopped right behind my back. "What do you want, Tyler?" I snapped, ripping one earplug out. He didn't answer. The silence stretched, just the sound of heavy, shallow breathing right over my shoulder. "Seriously," I said, rolling over onto my back, ready to chew him out. The room felt smaller than it should have, like the air itself had thickened. Something was standing over my bed, too close. And then I heard the rustle of my laptop bag moving on the desk. At first it didn't register, just that soft sound in the dark, like something being shifted around without urgency. I turned slightly, trying to see what was happening, and that's when I caught him leaning over my desk, pulling my laptop out and sliding it into the inside of his coat like he already knew exactly what he was doing. My brain didn't process it at first. I just froze, staring at the shape in the dark, waiting for it to make sense, but it didn't. I noticed the smell, alcohol, dirt, something old like wet fabric left in a dumpster. It wasn't Tyler. The guy was way too tall. He was wearing a filthy, dark winter parka. His face was obscured by a thick, matted beard. He definitely wasn't a college student. He looked like a drifter, someone who had no business being inside the dorm. How the hell did a guy off the street get through 3 layers of university security? I scrambled backward against the wall. I pulled my knees up to my chest. "Get out," I yelled, my voice cracked. The tough, angry tone I used on Tyler completely vanished. The man didn't flinch, he didn't run, he just slowly tilted his head to the side. He raised his right hand. He was holding a dorm key. Attached to the key was a bright blue university lanyard, Tyler's lanyard. He tossed the lanyard onto the floor, then zipped his coat up, turned around, unlocked the door, and walked out into the hallway like nothing about what had just happened mattered at all. I sat frozen against the wall for what felt like minutes before my hands finally stopped shaking enough for me to reach for my phone, and I called campus security. They arrived quickly and swept the building, checking every floor, but they didn't find anyone. When I handed them Tyler's keys, the officer just bagged the lanyard and said, "Your roommate probably dropped these outside. A transient likely picked them up, got into the building, and tried doors until one opened." The explanation made sense in a technical way, but it didn't calm anything inside me, and I stayed in the security office until sunrise, just waiting for Tyler to come back so I could scream at him for being careless enough to let someone into our room while I was asleep. Around 8 in the morning, the head of campus police came in and sat across from me, and he didn't look annoyed or routine about it. He looked uneasy, like something about the situation was already wrong. "We located your roommate," he said quietly. "Good," I replied immediately, because he owes me a $1,200 laptop. But the officer just shook his head and said, "Tyler didn't lose his keys." There was a pause before he added, "Tyler was attacked around 2 a.m. The room felt colder after that sentence, and what they told me next didn't feel real at first. The man in the parka hadn't just stumbled onto campus or found anything on the ground. He had cornered Tyler in an alley behind a bar near campus, beaten him badly enough to fracture his jaw and ribs, and stripped everything from his pockets before leaving him there. Tyler was in the ICU now, his jaw wired shut, unable to speak, and the anger I had been holding on to just disappeared in a single moment, replaced by something heavier and far more hollow. Because suddenly it was clear the man hadn't wandered onto campus at all. He had taken Tyler's wallet, found his student ID inside, and printed on that ID was our exact room number, which meant he didn't guess, he didn't search, and he didn't try doors at random. He walked straight to ours. I moved off campus the next week into a second-floor apartment with new locks and a deadbolt installed the same day I moved in.